Hey everybody, Ranger William here from the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail, bringing you another episode, part 6 of our program, Covered with Flame and Smoke, Weapons and Tactics at the Battle of Kings Mountain, October 7th, 1780. Why are we doing this? When you look at the Battle of Kings Mountain, you can get for a much more in-depth explanation back in episode 1 if you want to check that out. But real quickly, why we're doing this is to better understand this battle. This is one of those major turning points of the war. It was a big deal. They recognized it then. We still recognize it now. But the problem with popular big deals is people like to talk about them. And they talk so much, sometimes the story gets a little twisted. Sometimes the story is embellished in certain places. So let's look at what really happened. Let's find the eyewitness accounts. What did the guys in the 18th and 19th century say about this battle? What do we know from battlefield archaeology? Well, how was the ridge described? The weaponry? What did they say it could do? All these different reasons. We're trying to get a better understanding, a better appreciation of the Battle of Kings Mountain and what was accomplished here at the end of the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail. So a quick recap, let's get up to speed. Episode 1, we talked about the trail, talked about the campaign, where are they coming from, where are they going, and there at the rocky footprint ridge of Kings Mountain. We talked about the flintlock. Well, how does that work? What is all this flint nonsense? The smoke, the covered with flame and smoke, hence the program name. We talked about the ballistics. What kind of bullets? What kind of projectiles are we looking at here? What are they made of? What's their size? We talked about muskets, the good things, the bad things, rifle good things, rifle bad things. We talked about hand-to-hand combat, bayonets, hatchets, hunting knives, all kinds of good stuff. What are they bringing to fight close? We talked about who these guys are, how many each little group has around the side, who's really going to be in the fight. We talked about their leadership, their idea of using what they called Indian play, the kind of unconventional tactics that the Brits may not have been expecting. We talked about the heavy amount of gunfire that just chokes in this loyalist position and the deadly lethal marksmanship being shown on both sides. And now here we're going to jump into, it's not just long-range fire, they get close, y'all. They're reaching out and touching somebody. It is close combat here in episode 6. So I put myself right in front of the author. So this is a painting of Kings Mountain done by Robert Wilson. I chose this because of this great example you have here showing some of this hand-to-hand combat. You got a guy jumping on a redcoat over there, knife in hand, swinging his rifle, Fess Parker style. Let's talk about this. These guys are not just long-range blasting muskets, rifle fire, sniping at each other. They get close. The Patriot riflemen, they are swarming up the hillsides. And Patrick Ferguson, his officers, they know the major disadvantage of the rifle is in close combat. Go back to episode 2. Check out why we're talking about that. The rifle cannot fit a bayonet on the end. You cannot use that as a spear in hand-to-hand combat. When it comes down to close quarters, your riflemen are using hand weapons. Just above me, you can kind of see a guy there with a hatchet in his hand. Hatchets, tomahawks, knives, their arm's length, that is their range with that weapon. You're going up against loyalist troops, either militia or provincials, with a musket, either British shortland pattern, French musket, Dutch musket, doesn't matter. When you fit a 14 to 16 inch blade on the end of that weapon, that's a 6-foot spear. No one with a knife in their hand has a 6-foot range. So when it comes down to hand-to-hand combat, bayonets are going to win so much that we talked a little bit about Patrick Ferguson, the story of him either having special hunting knives made for his men or having his militia whittle down the handles of their knives so that they can jam them into their rifle barrels and have a bayonet to fight with. Ferguson and his officers know the strength of the bayonet. So he's going to use, especially his provincials here, the best trained men with this weapon. Maybe some of the South Carolina loyalists also had time to train and practice with this. They're going to use them like shock troops. They're going to use them to go around and move different parts of the ridge wherever they need to plug a hole. Wherever the Patriots are gaining ground, put in the volunteers, the American volunteers, get these bayonets in there and push the Patriots back down the ridgeline. So how many times did they do this? Campbell's Virginians over on the southeast side talk about being charged 3 different times. Isaac Shelby's North Carolinians, just across the ridge from Campbell's Virginians, they were also charged 3 different times. This is where you get some of these provincials charging down one side and then having to go and charge down the other, and back and forth and back and forth, just exhausting themselves, being exposed to Patriot rifle fire the entire time. Ben Cleveland's guys up on the north, kind of the toe of the northeast part, the toe of the footprint, they charge about being charged once on one side and then twice on the other. So not, different forces are having different success with this tactic. Let's see. Chronicles men being charged once. Joseph McDowell's men charged once. And interestingly, the South Carolinians on the northwest side of the ridge, right to the left of Isaac Shelby, they don't record being charged at all. No bayonet charges recorded by their guys. So possibly, maybe they were facing the some of the less trained Loyalist militia. In this case, that would be the North Carolina Loyalists, also noted as some of the first ones to run out of ammunition and break from their position. So maybe that could be who they're facing against. Now, talked a little bit, I just mentioned how the provincials kind of having to charge back and forth, kind of move around. That has its problems. If you're on an open battlefield, regular combat, bayonet charge is effective, the militia are going to run, and the Loyalist militia, these provincials, can win the day. Ferguson has seen it all over the South. But the problem here, he's defending the ridge. So they can charge the Patriots away all they want. The Loyalists cannot keep pursuing. They got to come back. And also, we talked about with that leadership and that idea of it's okay to retreat as long as you come back again. Some of the times, the Loyalists, as they're climbing back up to their position, they're being fired in the back by these returning Patriots. The charges are not having the effect they need to win this battle. Now, after repulsing one charge, Isaac Shelby actually talks about this. He's quoted as saying, "Now, boys, quickly reload your rifles and let's advance upon them and give them another hell of a fire," end quote. So they see the advantage. They know they can run away. The Loyalists can't keep pursuing them at some point, and they can go back under their own terms. Robert Henry, he's 16 years old. He's here with the Patriots going up the tree line. He talks about encountering some of these charging Loyalist troops. He says he uses his rifle to deflect a bayonet that's aimed for him. He is able to touch off the trigger and shoot the Loyalist, but the bayonet blade slides down that barrel through Robert Henry's hand into his thigh, pinning the two together, pinning his hand to his leg. He says he's laying there, stuck together, watching the rest of his company kind of retreat from the rest of the charging Loyalists, but they're reloading as they retreat. And when his company is finally reloaded, the Loyalists are only about 20 feet away. Robert Henry says the rest of his company turned and fired, just decimated the Loyalist ranks, and the survivors went fleeing back up to their position. He says that after that, a friend came along and he was able to free Robert Henry's hand by kicking the bayonet loose and then just pulling it apart. So kind of painful there to think about, but he got back in the fight. Now, the Loyalists, we'll talk about these bayonet charges. The Loyalists are not the only ones charging. They're not the only ones showing this kind of aggression. Like you got some of these Patriots here just going after it. When the lines get close enough, and some accounts talk about only being 20, 30 yards away, a few of these Patriots are going to take advantage of the thick smoke of some of the chaos, and they're going to rush up into the Loyalist ranks and either grab a prisoner or strike a blow in hand-to-hand combat. One of these was Captain William Edmondson of William Campbell's Virginia Regiment. Draper talks about him. He says that he supposedly remarked to a friend that he didn't like his position, so he just ran up ahead of his men into the Loyalist ranks. He clubbed one with his rifle. He shot another one with his rifle. He's going to then grab another Loyalist by the neck and drag him back as a prisoner. Charles Gordon, one of Ben Cleveland's men, also described as running up into the Loyalist ranks, grabbing an officer by his hair, and trying to drag him back down to the Patriot lines as a prisoner. However, there's going to be a lot of fighting back. There's going to be a scuffle, pistol shot, sword drawn. Long story short, the Loyalist officer did not make it back to Patriot lines, but Charles Gordon did. But a lot of hand-to-hand combat going on all around the ridge whenever these lines get close. It's not just going to be gunfire, but blades are going to be used here at the battle. And now let's talk about a little more who they're fighting. They may not need uniforms. This big idea here of the revolution, we have to be careful, especially here in the South. It's us and them. It's the British against the Americans. Well, Kings Mountain is the perfect example of that. It's the perfect example, kind of the crown jewel, if you have called it, of the partisan war in this split communities, split families fighting each other. There's only about 80 to 90 of those provincials with Ferguson who are wearing any sort of uniform. Now, here's an example over here on the side by Don Troiani, the King's American Regiment, not one of the ones here at the battle, but an example of what some of these provincials might have been issued. But only about 80 to 90 of Ferguson's 1,100 men were wearing these uniforms. All the rest were wearing these kind of hat decorations. Thomas Young, he describes them. He says, quote, "I found myself apparently between my own regiment and the enemy, as I judged from seeing the paper which the Whigs wore in their hats," like our guy up here above me here, got that paper in the hat, "and the pine twigs that the Tories wore in theirs, these being the badges of distinction," end quote. So you have just these few little emblems here. Another account talks about a few loyalists who they, I think it's either Allaire or Chesney talks about some of the loyalists who saw that the battle was going badly for them. They actually take the pine twigs out of their hats and run into the Patriot lines and disguise themselves as patriots. That's how easy it was to change uniforms like that. But with that being the only uniform, the rest of the militia, the rest of the forces here, they're wearing kind of their same outfits, their same frontier hunting clothes or work clothes. In one case of kind of mistaken identity because of the similarity of clothing, Charles Bowen, he was a Patriot soldier. He hears kind of through, word of mouth, the game of telephone, he hears that his brother Reese Bowen had been killed. So he becomes almost crazed with grief. He just makes his way around the battlefield looking for his brother, trying to see what has happened, and he ends up getting out between the two lines, kind of in that no man's land, between that kind of moving no man's land between Patriot and Loyalist positions. Now, when he gets out there, he is spotted by none other than the terror of the Tories, Ben Cleveland, one of the leading Patriot officers in the fight. When he sees this guy just moving in the no man's land, not sure what's going on there, he calls out the challenge. He calls for the password, their agreed upon signal of Buford, as a way to identify friend from foe in this chaos. Buford being a reference to Abraham Buford, the American officer at the Battle of the Waxhaws back in May of 1780. But Charles doesn't hear him. Either he doesn't hear him, doesn't understand what's going on. So when Ben Cleveland calls out for the he calls out for the password, Charles doesn't respond with the password. Ben Cleveland thinks he's a loyalist, raises his rifle, pulls the trigger, and misfires. So when Charles Bowen sees this guy yelling and trying to shoot at him, he thinks that Ben Cleveland's a loyalist, grabs his hatchet, goes to strike this leader of the Patriot forces, and thankfully a friend intervenes. Someone who knows them both rushes in, catches Charles Bowen's arm, and gives them just that second that they needed to get their head on straight, recognize each other, give the password. It's said that Cleveland then embraces Bowen and they get back into the fight together. Later, he's going to find that Reese Bowen had not been killed. Now, talking about brothers and looking for each other, some of these men, they did not need badges to identify friend from foe, because they're serving with their relatives. I'm trying to. I think it was the Edmondsons with William Campbell. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of there's several of them. I want to say close to 7. There's several of the Edmondsons in Campbell's regiment during the battle in his company. Now, so they're serving alongside their family, but other times they're serving against their family. This is going to be one of the more saddening parts of the partisan war, of the revolution in the South, of the revolution everywhere, is it splits families. Famously, even Benjamin Franklin, his son William Franklin, was a royal governor, a loyalist. But here at Kings Mountain, you're going to see this happen a lot. So a few stories we have about this. Thomas Robertson, here's one story. He's behind a tree. He's a patriot. He's taking cover. He hears his name called out. Hey, hey, Tom. Hey, Thomas. So he goes to look, and he's almost shot. One of his old neighbors, recorded as only named as Mr. Lafferty, was a loyalist. He's up on the ridgetop. He was calling out to Thomas, trying to draw him out so that he could kill him. Well, Thomas realized what's happening. He fires back, hits Lafferty, who calls out, "Robertson, you have ruined me." And Robertson just replies back, "The devil help you." There is nothing more bitter. It's not just politics with some of these guys. It's betrayal. It's personal. Another patriot, William Twitty of the South Fork Boys, he says that he almost gets hit, but he sees the cloud of smoke, sees the puff, the cloud of gun smoke from where that shot came from. So he waits till he sees someone moving, fires back, and he hits him. And after the battle, he goes to see, okay, who was this guy that almost got me? And it's one of his close neighbors, had been one of his close neighbors. A loyalist named Branson is wounded on the fight, and as the Patriots surge up the mountainside, they pass by the wounded Branson, and he looks up, and he sees his brother-in-law, James Withrow, and he tries to call out, reach out to him, asking for help, and Withrow just looks to Branson and says, "Look to your friends for help." Kind of, you've chosen your side, you made your bed, now you have to lie in it. In another story, you have a couple loyalist riflemen were behind a chestnut tree. So this is where we get some of these ideas that it's loyalist marksmen as well. It's not just patriots with their rifles, but some loyalist marksmen are behind a chestnut tree, and there's a knot hole in the tree that they're able to look through, aim, and shoot through, not really having to reveal themselves to gunfire. And a patriot notices that they're being fired at from this chestnut hole. So he fires through the hole using his accuracy, fires through a couple times, and the loyalist fire stops. The patriot was effective. But he goes to see, okay, who was back here shooting at me from this tree? And it was 2 of his own brothers. He had killed one and wounded the other. It's recorded in Lyman Draper's book, quote, that so much did the patriot brother take the circumstance to heart that he became almost deranged in consequence, end quote. A couple other examples that we have of this whole idea of divided families. The Logan brothers from Lincoln County. William, a patriot, was near his captain when his captain was killed from a rifle ball, again, coming from a chestnut tree. Joseph Logan, another patriot. Then you have John, a loyalist, taken prisoner. And then Thomas Logan, a loyalist, badly wounded and left on the battlefield. The Goforth family of Rutherford County, 4 sons in the battle. Preston being the only loyalist, where John and his 2 other brothers were, Preston the only patriot, where John and the other 2 were loyalists, all 4 killed in the battle. Colonel Isaac Shelby even recorded talking about this. He said he saw 2 brothers at one point spot each other across the battlefield, raise their rifles, fire, and fall at the same time. So here you have some of the details about Kings Mountain here. You are looking at a very bitter, very personal fight for a lot of these guys. It's close, it's personal, it's hand-to-hand weapons at times, it's brothers against brothers, a few times fathers against sons. They don't need uniforms, even though they do have the white paper and the pine twigs to tell each other apart. They're recognizing faces as well. So that wraps up our episode here, part 6 of Cover with Flame and Smoke, looking at the weapons and tactics of the Battle of Kings Mountain. So go back, check out the other episodes, learn about the weaponry, the muskets, the rifles, the field of combat, learn about the position, learn about some of the leadership, the heavy amount of gunfire, some of the accounts of just the lead flying so thick, some of the accounts of the marksmanship. We saw a few of those accounts here of being able to shoot through the knothole of a tree. But thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, learned a little bit more about Kings Mountain. Again, this is Ranger William from the Overmountain Victory National Historic Trail. Thanks for watching.